Hello, and welcome to our Write the Docs talk. Today we'd like to talk about how our journey to implementing a diagrams as code tool to make our lives easier turned out to be a way we could help unblock other teams as well as spread our influence to the organization. First, a bit about our organization, Kong, and our docs team. Kong is the nervous system for all your organization's APIs. We simplify API management with our suite of products that include an API gateway, service mesh, and API client, as well as our cloud SaaS API platform. I'm Diana, a technical writer at Kong, and presenting with me today is Lena, another technical writer here at Kong. But as they say, it takes a village, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without our docs team of writers and docs tooling engineer. At Kong, our 4 writers and 1 docs tooling engineer currently support 13 product managers, about 150 engineers, and 30 technical support staff. We write release docs, maintain and improve documentation, as well as create feature releases for the documentation site. We're able to do what we do with such a small team because we are ruthless when it comes to efficiency and automation. Instead of throwing more writers at a problem, we ask ourselves if something can be automated, or if we can make it easier so we can spend more time on the things we enjoy instead of doing tedious, repetitive tasks. One of the projects that we undertook to increase our team efficiency was trying to solve our diagram problem. We realized we weren't efficient enough with diagrams, so we asked ourselves, how can we be more efficient when creating diagrams? And can we find a tool that's free and easy to use? Those questions led us to Mermaid. From the Mermaid project timeline, you can see that we were able to implement it quickly, but there were many lessons learned along the way. Throughout this presentation, we hope to share with you the lessons we learned from implementing Mermaid in hopes that you feel empowered to create impact in your own organization. Some of the lessons we learned were: sometimes the first time you come up with an idea isn't the right time. We needed to experience the frustrations of going through all the different diagram solutions before we were ready to try something new in Mermaid. Don't wait for someone else to fix your problems. Sometimes problems can persist, especially on docs teams, for a long time because we're used to seeing ourselves as individual contributors instead of leaders. Move beyond ideas and frustrations by biasing for action. Find solutions to your problems, because making a problem a docs problem leads to it being solved much faster than having someone else prioritize it. To influence, you must first have trust. Build trust with a team by helping them before you try to change how they work, even if it's for the better in the long run. Help them see how your change will make their lives easier and better. Take action, do the right thing, and others will follow. If you lead by example, you can also unblock contributors. The easy adoption of Mermaid on our docs led to people seeing it was useful, which then led to Mermaid being adopted everywhere else.
So before we could learn all the things that Diana just mentioned, we had to experience some pain when it came to diagrams in the docs. Hi, I'm Lena, and I'm going to tell you how we suffered. And we suffered for a while. And I'm sure some of you are going to see familiar themes along the way here. Initially, we had several main sources of diagrams that we used in our docs. We had Figma, we had Lucidchart, Miro, and Draw.io, and these were just the most commonly used tools. Every person that submitted a diagram, every new writer, every engineer came along with a different method of their own for creating diagrams. You can see where this is going. Over time, we ended up with a really wide array of styles, formats, and diagram types with zero cohesion. So, for example, here is a Figma diagram that I put together a couple of years back. The diagram itself isn't bad. It's pretty clean. It has good contrast. But unfortunately, because it was done in Figma, not everybody was familiar with the tool and not everybody was comfortable picking it up. Figma is primarily a design tool and is used by designers. It was difficult for writers and for engineers to jump on and become familiar with this tool and be comfortable with it. On top of that, we also had a limited number of licenses, so only a small number of people could make those images. I believe it was just myself and 2 other people. So we had other tools that were easier to use in Figma. Like I mentioned, Miro was easier, Draw.io, Lucidchart. So whichever writer, whichever engineer was making that diagram at the time, they just used whichever tool they thought was best for the use case. So here's the problem, though. As I mentioned earlier, at some point our Figma licenses were revoked in an effort to reduce spending, and I am sure that no one's heard that one before. So we had to rely on Lucidchart, Miro, and Draw.io, which of course, as we already talked about, this was a bit of a problem as everything was different. But then our company decided to stop using Miro and Lucidchart, so we lost license for everything, and we were down to just Draw.io. Now, this should be okay, right? Technically, we were just down to one tool. Now we were consistent, except not really. It was still unreliable, it was still kind of tough to use, and it was still inconsistent. So we decided to try a different approach. We reached out to marketing to create consistent diagrams. We reasoned, this way, the styling would be consistent, it would be on brand, we would be great. So of course, and this would have the added benefit that actual designers would be making the diagrams instead of a writing team. So suddenly, we were stuck behind a process. We had to submit a ticket to marketing that included what we needed for a diagram. We had to provide a date. We had to wait for a draft. And then we had to go back and forth to figure out what was the right one. So every single diagram suddenly took way too long. And of course, marketing was busy. They had their own projects. They had their own deadlines. So it just took a really long time to turn around just one simple diagram. On top of that, the branding that they typically used, which was meant for the Kong marketing site, didn't really match how we wanted to design diagrams for the doc site, which generally used more neutral colors and things that were easier on the eyes. We also had no real way to edit those diagrams other than going back to marketing and going through that same cycle of back and forth again. So marketing gave us a solution. Google Slides. Yeah. They gave us a template with branding elements that we could pick and choose from, copy, paste, move around, etc., etc. If you've ever worked on diagrams in Google Slides before, you know how finicky and messy this whole process is. It would take us ages just to get one diagram to align. So here is where I leave you in this story. Stuck making branded diagrams in Google Slides, or go back to the Draw.ioing board? So what are we supposed to do next?
What is Mermaid? It's a JavaScript-based diagramming and charting tool that renders Markdown-inspired text definitions to create and modify diagrams dynamically. Using Mermaid, you can create diagrams in a simplified Markdown syntax, and they will automatically render as diagram thanks to a Jekyll plugin that we use. Here are a few additional examples of the different types of Mermaid diagrams you can create. This wasn't the first time Mermaid was brought up. I actually found a blog link back in July 2022 that explained how Mermaid could now work in GitHub. This didn't take hold back then because we hadn't experienced the pain of creating diagrams in a bunch of different tools, and I only shared the link. There was nothing actionable about this, so no one took action. What Angel did differently than what I did when I first proposed it was he researched it, proposed a way to implement it with a Jekyll plugin, and explained its value. The team was excited about the potential of Mermaid. It could help us solve the problem of allowing people to provide inline feedback and changes on a diagram in a PR. It made for simplified diagrams that were a better fit for docs than the marketing style diagrams. It auto-generated diagrams so we didn't have to do any of the design ourselves. The next step was to come up with a proof of concept to see if Mermaid would even work for us. We knew we couldn't wait to see for someone else to try it out. We had to test it ourselves. One note here about how our team works and why we decided to jump in and solve the diagram problem instead of discussing it. We tend to bias for action. Why? If you do something and prove it can be done, people will be more likely to say yes. It's easy to block an idea that you can't visualize or see the benefit. It's harder to block something that's been built that can show you the benefit. It's faster to make a rough work in progress and get feedback than spend endless cycles getting feedback on an idea before you even make it. If you only ever think in ideas and don't take action, you might get completely stuck and your idea will only ever be an idea. To create our proof of concept, we learned that we could easily add a Mermaid plugin to our repo. This was possible because of the modularity of our static site generator, Jekyll, which you can extend with modules called Jekyll plugins. You can add any number of custom Jekyll plugins to extend sites' functionality, and lots of these plugins are shared by their creators online. We found a Jekyll implementation of Mermaid and were able to adapt it to our use case. This was key because the agency of being able to solve problems by looking at how someone else installed a plugin allowed us to figure out how it could be implemented in our repo. The plugin examples we found online gave us enough information to implement Mermaid. We worked as a team to add styling that matched Kong's branding and fix a few issues. Implementing Mermaid wasn't magic at all. It was fairly open and easy to understand. While we had our tooling engineer help and speed up the process, without him, we still would have made it work. It maybe would have been less efficient, but we still would have gotten there. This is to say that any team, regardless of whether you have a dedicated engineer or not, can also implement things like Mermaid. Now that the styling was added, we were able to add it to our docs repo and start converting some old diagrams to Mermaid. Here's an example of what our styling diagram looked like before and then, after we converted it to Mermaid. Now, most docs teams might stop there. After all, we'd solved our problem. We can now easily create diagrams without having to learn a complex tool for designers. At Kong, we subscribe to the idea that docs are a product, just like any other product Kong produces. This lends credibility to a docs team when the docs features are just as important as the product features. So like a product, we needed to shout about what we were doing and share it with others. But how do we go about doing that? Well, for any large docs feature release, we have targeted communications that we send out. Why targeted instead of a checklist? It's because for each feature, we assess who needs and wants to be informed about the change we made, and we make sure to let them know, tailoring our messaging to them. One avenue we used was creating a product release update in our product release Slack channel. This is org-wide communication that all products use to announce releases. We typically don't see much traction for features here, but we still want to inform the org about changes we've made. A key part of our communication plan also involves talking with stakeholders that we know will be impacted by this change. The type of communication here can vary. Sometimes we'll guest present at one of their team calls, or we'll craft a message specifically tailored to their needs in their team Slack channel. We know we wanted to talk to sales and support because they often reuse our diagrams in their own customer materials. Engineering was also impacted because they write many doc drafts, so we wanted them to know that it was now easier to create diagrams. Since explaining Mermaid to them, we've seen a large increase in developer-contributed diagrams, which make it easier for end users to visualize how something works. If the docs change impacts how we write docs like Mermaid did, we'll also document it in our style guide. In our style guide, we make sure to explain how to write Mermaid diagrams in Kong docs and an example of what they can look like. If we think the changes we are making reach further than just our team in Kong, we consider external communication, like blog posts on the Kong website or presentations like the one you're watching now. We decided against doing a blog post for our implementation of Mermaid because it's relatively straightforward. But we have done blog posts in the past when we worked on adding tools that were uncommon for docs teams, like when we added Shot Scraper to the docs, which allows us to automate screenshots of our UI products. After communicating with other teams about Mermaid, we started seeing a change that was made by just a few members of the docs team suddenly began to grow bigger. Several years ago, Kong donated their service mesh product called Kuma to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Although it is open source, Kong largely maintains it, including the docs. Because of CNCF rules, their docs repo must remain separate from our Kong docs repo, which means developers primarily write Kuma's documentation. I figured, since Mermaid makes it much easier for developers to create diagrams, that I would add our Mermaid implementation to their repo. It was relatively easy to add since it's just a Jekyll plugin. I was able to look at the PR we had in our repo and copy and paste it in. Once again, it was key here to bias for action by opening the PR and implementing Mermaid first instead of asking for permission. We found that a team is more likely to implement something if you show them you can do it first, and then let them see the benefits and let them see that they aren't on the hook to implement it themselves. Otherwise, you'd just be discussing an idea that they can't even visualize, which they'd be more likely to turn down since they can't see the benefit. However, we did receive some pushback. The Kuma team was already using Google Slides and didn't want to maintain two different ways of doing diagrams, which is understandable since the Docs team had similar issues in the past. Here's where established relationships with other teams came into effect. I'd been working with the Kuma team for several months already to help improve their documentation and make it easier for them to maintain. Because we'd already been building a positive relationship with them, or adding cookies to the metaphorical cookie jar, they were more receptive to our Mermaid suggestion. Because we'd already built trust with the members of the Kuma team, the engineering manager supported our change and saw the value in it. We were able to allay some of their fears by showing them the Mermaid diagrams we'd already added to our Docs website. It's important to note that we didn't just add this to Kuma and leave. We supported them with it and made docs on how to use it. Pretty soon, the PR was approved and merged, and the Kuma team could now use Mermaid in their docs. But then, Mermaid started growing organically without us adding it. We started to get flooded with requests by other Kongers about how they could use Mermaid to add diagrams to our docs. There were some questions which help us iterate and improve our diagram section in the style guide. Solutions can always be iterated on. In fact, it's best to release something before you might feel ready, just so you bias for action. By releasing quickly, you're able to uncover more questions than if you tried to anticipate every problem before creating the solution. You can always iterate later. The Connect team, our cloud platform product, saw our success with Mermaid. They pushed to have it added to the UI without our help, so that our customers could add diagrams easily to their API documentation. Soon, other teams like the training team and sales were asking us how they could reuse our Mermaid diagrams in their own content. We tried coming up with a solution that would auto-generate screenshots of the diagrams or use the Mermaid CLI, but we found the simplest and easiest answer was the best way. We updated our style guide with the instructions for how someone could not only get the image, but also edit it using Mermaid's live editor. Like any product, we still get feedback on Mermaid, so we continue to iterate and learn more about its capabilities. Although it's not perfect, we're happy to have found a tool that helps unblock not only our writers, but our whole organization from creating diagrams. That being said, there are a few things we would have done differently if we were implementing the project all over. We wish we'd started sooner. I learned a valuable lesson that sharing an idea, like just the link to a blog post, without any action or actionable steps led us to not implementing Mermaid sooner. Also, if we'd been louder, both internally and externally, we think we could have helped a lot more people faster. We hope that this presentation empowers you to drive changes at your organization and teams and has shown you just how much impact individual contributors can have when you bias for action. If you'd like to reach out to us, our contact information is listed on the slide. We've also included links to our Mermaid docs in our style guide and the Mermaid Live editor in case you'd like to try it out for yourself. Thank you for your time. We're happy to answer any questions following the presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to the Q&A with Lena and Diana, and I'm hoping that they will join us in a minute. Well, hello, Diana.
Hello.
Is Lena going to be joining us too, or is it just you?
She should be. I think I see her joining.
Excellent, excellent. That was a fascinating talk. I just loved it. I really am always interested in any kind of diagram improvement that we can do. We've got a ton of questions. People really obviously loved your talk. I'm going to go with the ones that are upvoted. Oh, hi. Hi, Lena. So good to see you.
Hello, hello.
What I'm going to start with the upvoted talks, and then we will go from there. So do you have any recommendations for managing access to diagrams once they are developed so that they are available to and maintainable by everyone on the team?
Yeah, I can probably take this one. So in our implementation, because we're using Jekyll, and it's a Jekyll plugin, the diagrams, the code for those lives right alongside our Markdown documentation. So as you're looking through the documentation, it's right there right next to the actual like technical documentation. So anybody who has access to our repo, which is open source, has access to those diagrams. So anybody can edit it and edit those.
And how has it been going?
Oh, pretty good. We've had a lot of people contribute. Mermaid is like fairly easy to understand, and you can see like how the objects are pointing to each other, and also edit the text right inside of the diagram, which is a lot easier than trying to screenshot a diagram and then type text in there and saying, I want this to change to this. So we can just, people can suggest it as part of a PR, and we can just approve their suggestions.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds very interactive. Well, we have another question. When working in a small team, or even maybe as the lone writer, how do you make a business case for experimentation of the sort that you two did?
Do you want me to take this one?
Sure.
Our team is fairly small. I think it's not lone writer though. The business case in this case is efficiency, by far more efficient to create diagrams as code than it is to try to fiddle around with like PowerPoints or anything like that. And then the other part of it is the implementation was actually really, really, really easy. So it just immediately fell into place that it was going to be much, much easier to do this, much, much faster. Saves a lot of time.
Oh, that's nice to hear, because that was really a big issue for you, was having the time to create all the diagrams that people were asking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can see your big nods there. Okay, here's another question. What are your experiences with bigger and more complex diagrams? I've seen other tools generating a bit awkwardly formatted diagrams.
Yeah, I can take this. Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, the Mermaid Live Editor is really helpful for this because you can sort of like experiment with like moving things around and seeing how it edits on the go. And Lena just shared with me this morning that there's a VS Code plugin for that as well. So you can edit your docs in VS Code and also see how it renders.
Okay, so it's a combination of a visual interface and a coding interface for putting the docs together.
Yeah, their live editor is a really useful tool for that, because yes, you write your code and then immediately side by side, like in real time, it adjusts the diagram. And we've had there is one very notable submission we had from an engineer. The diagram is multiple screen scrolls long, because he was trying to create to illustrate this really, really complex use case, and all on his own, fully on his own. Just like, you know what, let me just map this out, and it'll make way more sense. And it was really cool to see somebody just go off and do that.
Okay, so have you both answered? Then you're good. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any graphic designers that you work with? And what do they think of Mermaid.js? Isn't this more like coding than drawing a diagram? So that might be a little bit of a barrier for a graphic designer.
We don't have any graphic designers that we work with directly on our docs. We do sometimes work with like UX designers when they help us like change the interface of our doc site, but none that really directly comment on the diagrams themselves. I think everybody that we've talked to has been really happy with how easy it is to render, because like Lena said before, it's a massive time savings for us and them. It's easier for them to create the diagram than to explain it to us how they are visualizing it in their head, or create it in like PowerPoint or something like that, which is what they were doing before.
Yeah, that does seem much superior to doing that. Very interesting. Okay, let's see. What roadblocks have you encountered with Mermaid? It doesn't sound like you've encountered very many, but you must have had a few.
Yeah, the ones that I mentioned with like the Kuma team, which is developers, they were already using Google Slides. And so it was all about showing them like how Mermaid was a lot easier. And also, you didn't have to work in a separate tool, and your diagrams would live right alongside your docs. So showing them that, but also having them be aware that like this isn't necessarily meant to replace their diagrams that they were already using, and they don't have to convert everything. This could just be another tool that they could use, because otherwise they were worried that they would have to go through all of their diagrams and convert everything. So it's kind of like working alongside with them and understanding their pain points and helping them where they were at, versus telling them they have to do something our way.
Oh, that's nice. It's nice to give them lots of options. Yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, how about, what are a few of the engineers' most helpful contributions when helping you transition to Mermaid?
Could you rephrase that question?
Well, I think that it means when engineers were contributing, when they've contributed diagrams, are there particularly helpful things that they've done? Have they helped you transition to Mermaid? It seems to be focused on the engineer's role.
I guess so. We have an engineer that's directly on our team, that is a tooling engineer that strictly works on docs. So he's been really helpful, and he was helpful in setting it up originally. But I don't know. I guess like on the Kuma side, I don't think. I'm trying to think of how they've been helpful otherwise. I think it's more the other way around. We've been more helpful to them in the sense that it's much easier for them to make these diagrams, and they aren't blocked by us. I guess that's the other thing.
Nice.
They aren't blocked by styling. Like everything's consistent. Yeah, I think it's that direction.
We have a lot of engineers too who submit first drafts for docs, and so before they would just sort of send us like a wall of text or like some code blocks. But now they do and can like include Mermaid diagrams to go along with that.
Nice.
Sort of like show how something works, and we can make edits if we want to. But we've been getting a lot more Mermaid diagrams from engineers in general after we added this.
That's interesting. So does the Mermaid plugin or the Mermaid.js, does it have like a style sheet or a design system that you can create? Is that what you've been doing? If you said that in your talk, I missed it.
It does have, it does have some things you can adjust. So this is one of the things that, nothing's perfect, right? So it's not fully adjustable. There are things that you can't adjust to fit your own style systems, your own branding. So we're still working on that.
Okay.
Always improvements, but it is very much adjustable, like colors, fonts, shapes, that sort of thing. That's all adjustable.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now here's somebody is saying this is possibly a dumb question. I don't think it's dumb. Can you use Mermaid but not Git?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. I was thinking that was probably the answer, but I didn't think it was dumb at all.
Yeah, not at all.
And how about the look and feel of Mermaid diagrams? Are you getting good feedback on that, on basically the look and feel and the usability of them?
So consistency is number one in this case. So right now, the biggest thing that we've had is being able to have consistent styling on the diagrams. We've gone with a very, very, very basic, just like gray and blue styling for ours. And we haven't had complaints. So I guess I'll leave it there, unless Diana's heard otherwise.
I don't think so. I think everybody just finds it a lot easier to use than some of the other tools we had.
It sounds like a great way to interact and collaborate with your larger team. Sounds really nice for that. Now, here's an interesting question. It's a little bit of a variation on an earlier one. Do you enforce version control or limit who can contribute changes?
So we do have our docs are open source. Anybody can contribute,
right.
But it is, somebody from our team has to review it and accept or not accept the changes.
Right.
So it is version controlled in that sense, because it is in GitHub. So GitHub does the version control for us. We have our own versioning structure inside our docs. Generally for diagrams, we don't run into too many situations where we need to version them, although it does happen. But then we are the ones that add that sort of that tagging before it actually goes live.
Okay. And this is a really great question, especially considering one of the talks earlier today. How does Mermaid handle accessibility? Do you feel like by using more diagrams now you might be less accessible?
That is a really good question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for our diagrams, we also make sure to include markdown description of the figure as well. So that can be read by screen readers. But I think the screen readers also will read the diagram, and they have that capability in Mermaid. They'll go through the text that's in the diagram and be able to read that.
Oh, okay. Excellent. I'm glad that you've really been considering the accessibility issues. Here's another one. Are there other examples of projects where you've taken the ask for forgiveness rather than permission strategy, and how did that go?
That's kind of our go-to for the most part, especially on bigger projects. We had a big project last year where we worked on turning all our APIs into specs, writing specs for all of our APIs, and instead of just waiting we've been asking engineers to do forever, and we just took it into our own hands and went, okay, we're just going to do this, and that's been wonderful. On smaller things, we generally just go ahead and do it, and again, we haven't had anybody complain. It seems to work for us.
Sounds great. Sounds like you're having a really positive experience. Oh, yeah, here's a great one that's been kind of floating up and down on the number of votes. Which platform do you publish your documentation and diagrams on?
Is this asking what sort of hosting platform we use?
I think so, yeah.
We use Netlify to build our docs, and then we use Jekyll on the back end.
Mm-hmm. And you said Mermaid also uses Jekyll, right?
It can, yep. There's a plugin for it.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. How about the look and feel of these Mermaid diagrams? This has actually already been asked. Are you getting good feedback? I think the answer was yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And are there tools that can generate Mermaid code from a diagram created in a UI? So sort of the reverse. You've got it. That's a great question.
That is a great question. We don't know.
I love it.
I don't know. I haven't even thought of that, but I like it. That's something to look into. That's a great idea.
A way to convert something to your system that's already there.
I imagine AI probably, because I know, Diana, I know you use once in a while, you'll use ChatGPT to generate the draft of a diagram. I think you could probably do something similar by giving it a diagram and asking it to turn it into a sort of preliminary code.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. It's something we're going to have to explore afterwards. Now, how should people get in touch with you after this? Do you want them to contact you on LinkedIn, or you have a different way?
Well, I think for me, LinkedIn works. It's just my name, Diana Breza, on LinkedIn.
Yep, LinkedIn will work,
Same for
or
you.
email. Yeah.
Email. Yeah, I think your email is just
Yep.
in all of the conference materials. So yeah, please get in touch, because these are the great questions have just been coming in because people are very excited by your talk. I am intrigued. I'm going to show this to, we actually have a graphic designer that creates our diagrams. I'm going to show this to her and see what she thinks, because it should be real interesting to get her opinion on it. Okay. Well, I have appreciated talking to the two of you. You have been really fun. Thank you for your energy and the great talk that you gave. But do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'll see you in the ether.
Thank you for having us.